Hi again, and in this video we will explain the stages of a lesson plan. But before we start, we have to make a disclaimer that each teacher should devise his own lesson plan format. There is no universally recognized format of a lesson plan. You should see which one best fits your teaching style and your students' needs as well. So again, there is no universally recognized lesson form, and you need to see or try to improvise and bring together one that is really suitable to you and to your teaching style. However, there are elements that should lead to a recognized lesson plan. There are many approaches to lesson plan. I'm gonna show you the standard one. The first approach, which is the PPP approach. From its name, it has 3 P's. So the first one indicates presentation, the second one indicates practice, and the third one indicates production. In the presentation phase, it refers to the introduction of the teaching point. Here, you present the knowledge to the students. You give them the language. You give them the skill. You elicit from them what they know already, and you're trying to give them the teaching point in a suitable context. So you're presenting the information in this stage. And the second stage is the practice stage, which you try to allow the students to practice the learned point in a controlled or a restricted manner. You can monitor them, you can supervise their work, you can correct them, and you can help them throughout. Examples of the exercise that should be done in the practice phase, kind of repetition drills, questions and answers. You can ask them to fill in the gaps of information. You can give them blanks. You can give them a matching game. So the practice phase is for making sure that students have already confirmed the learning that you have presented in the presentation phase. If we come to the production phase, it's the stage where students should now take the target language and demonstrate it that they can use it in their own context without any direct control from the teacher. So make sure that your students are using the target language independently. They are using this away from your help, away from your control. Like, for example, when you ask students to use the target language in problem-solving activities such as role plays, debates, and presentations. Here, students become freer from the teacher's control, and they can practice the language on their own. Now, at this stage, it is preferable if you exit the whole scene of teaching. Try to be as far as possible from the students. If you want to come closer to monitor their work, so just take some notes on what they're saying and what they're doing so that you can give them feedback later on. So let them interact either one-to-one or in small groups. It depends on the design that you're going to present it in the production phase. We want to highlight something about the production phase. It's the transition between the classroom and the outside world. Now, you want your students to practice what you have taught them in the outside real life situations without your help. So make sure that your production phase is that kind of transition. It should be contextualized. It should be real life oriented. You should put them in a setting or a place or a context where they can find it outside the classroom. Again, it should be of higher difficulty, not the same level of the presentation or the knowledge presented in the presentation. It should be of a higher level or a higher context or a different setting so that they can use their previous knowledge and the knowledge that you have presented to them. Not only ask questions, not merely ask questions. You have to make sure that there is a whole project that they can work on or can use their knowledge in this production phase. Students here could experiment the language that was learned before by doing a hands-on experiment like role-playing, presentation. They can make a whole discussion, they can make a whole debate using the language that you have taught them. While students are doing this exercise in the production phase, you can monitor them in order to give them open class feedback at the end, both on content and on language. So Tell them, for example, that you have heard nice stuff about their ability to reserve a table in a restaurant, for instance, or a room in a hotel, and also tell them that you have some concerns about some language tips or some language slips that you have heard, and write them on the board and ask them to self-correct it. So again, you are encouraging self-correction here. So in your production phase, students will be so grateful when you give them feedback on their content and on their language as well, and help them to correct themselves. Imagine that you have a 40-minute lesson and you want to plan this. My advice to you is to plan it bottom top. Like, think about the production phase. After putting your objective, think about your production phase. What do you want your students to do at the end? So if you design the production phase first, so you'll give it the most of the time, because you have 40 minutes, so give like 20 minutes, which is half the lesson, to the production phase. It's the production phase, again, we said we were stressing that this is the transition phase between the classroom and the real life outside. So give it 20 minutes, and also give students some feedback on their content and on their language. If you give like 20 minutes to the production phase, so this means that you have 20 minutes left. I would suggest that you divide it this way. In the practice phase, think about how students will practice this, whether you're going to give them exercises or information gap exercises, and give it maximum from 5 to 7 minutes. Then go for the presentation phase, where you have to do some talk or you have to give them knowledge, and this supposed not to exceed the 10 minutes limit. Don't forget also to wrap up your lesson at the end, because this is the last thing that students will hear from you, and will make an echo inside their heads when they go home and remember your lesson. So give it again 5 minutes. So if you calculate this, you will find your lesson is 40 or 45 minutes maximum. So this is my advice to you when you plan a 40-minute lesson. And the same thing if you have 60 minutes or 1 hour and a half lesson. So plan it accordingly. Have the time, give it to the production, where students may have many production phases, and then try to arrange the other phases accordingly. Now, I'm showing you now an example of a lesson plan following the PPP model. Now, 40 minutes, it's divided as follows: 10 minutes for the presentation, 5 to 7 minutes for the practice, and 20 minutes for the production phase, and also 5 minutes for the wrapping up. Now, as I indicated here, the presentation phase is for I as a teacher does. Like, for example, it's me as a teacher, me to students. I'm talking to students. Sometimes I ask students to speak in pairs, for instance, or discuss a few questions. So I'm trying to make this presentation phase as interactive as possible. Now, for the practice phase, we do, me and the students, the teacher and the students. The students are doing certain exercises, and the teacher is there to monitor them and watch for mistakes, and then give feedback at the end. So here we do. So I do, we do, me and the students. And then for the production phase, try to exclude yourself from the scene and make students to work together as much as possible. Give them more production, give them more time to speak and produce the language. Put them in situations where they can debate, write something, correct each other, and then at the end you can show up in order to give them only feedback to the whole class, or correct few things, but not all. And students, as I said in the feedback, students would like to hear from you something about the content and something about the language. In this phase, it's the students who is doing the whole process with the minimum control from the teacher's side. Of course, you're acquainted with the lesson plan template that I sent you, and I explained it many times in class. Here, it's very easy. You have to, this lesson plan is for give the name of the lesson, or give the name of the level of the students, and it is adapted from Oxford, for example, English curriculum for whatever, cutting edge, whatever, let's talk. So put the name of the book here, and then you're gonna write your name as a trainee teacher. You're gonna put the date, and your teaching practice is number 1. Here you're gonna put the title of the lesson, for example, eating habits, or playing sports, dangerous sports, and the length of the lesson is normally 40 minutes, but we plan something like 35 minutes in case we have interruptions inside the classroom, in case we have some students who are struggling with something, or I'm asking students at the end to do a homework or to evaluate me. So better to plan 35 minutes. As for the level of the students, put the level, like whether intermediate, upper intermediate, whatever. So put the level of the student here. Now, for the main objective of the lesson, I'm gonna dedicate a whole lesson for formulating the main objective. However, we said that the main objective of a lesson is supposed to be one main objective, and it is directed to the production phase. And it normally starts with, by the end of this class, my students will be able to speak freely about or to do a survey, or to write a postcard. So this is the production, which is content employing the language learned in class. Now, for the secondary objective, normally we have 2 objectives, and they are directed to the skills that I want my students to acquire along the way. Like, for example, they're gonna listen for details, they're gonna listen for just, they're gonna find out meanings of new vocabulary, or they're gonna do a presentation, or they're gonna learn a certain grammar rule or certain structure, and so on. As for the material, you have to list here the material that you're gonna use. Like, for example, handouts, you're gonna use markers, speakers, visual aids, speakers, for instance. Okay, the things that you want to work out on, for example, like, for example, when you say my voice, I want to lower my voice, or make it a bit enthusiastic or motivating to the students. I want to work on my pronunciation. I want to work on my instruction questions, in ICQs, for example, instruction checking questions, or I want to work on giving feedback to the students. It depends on you as a teacher, and you of course know your points of weaknesses. Now, for the whiteboard, in a minute I'm gonna show you an example of a whiteboard and how we make it like appealing to the students. And the thing is that we normally divide it into 2 parts. The fixed part, this is the fixed part. Don't write fixed on the board, but just like this is the fixed part, where I put the things, objectives of my lessons, aims, what am I gonna achieve throughout the day, and then I'm gonna put also the vocab, for instance, or grammar rule that students may use in the production phase. So in this fixed area, I never erase what is written in the fixed area. I keep it for the students in order to look at them from time to time and use them throughout the lesson. In this empty area, this is my workspace. In this workspace, you put the visual aids, you put pictures, you ask students you give them students feedback, and you correct their answers. You may ask students to come and write something on the board, you erase, you add something else. So this is your battlefield. This is your workspace where you can erase things and write another thing, and so on. Okay. As for the anticipated problems, normally they are related to the language, or some misbehavior problems that happens inside the classroom, or what is your suggested solution for these activities. If you have odd numbers of students, for instance, if students come late, if they are struggling with a grammar rule, so you have to anticipate what students may encounter. Like, for example, if you are planning to explain the present perfect tense, in case students have difficulty in differentiating between present perfect tense and past simple tense, so what you're gonna do? So are you going to explain it once more, or you're going to first, before you introduce the present perfect tense, you're going to recap what's past simple tense, and then now you can relate to the new rule, or you can guide them from this rule to the other rule. So make sure that you can anticipate what students are struggling with, especially if you are the main classroom teacher, and you can tell exactly where students are and where are you willing to head them towards. Now, this is the model lesson plan I have presented to you before. This is the presentation, and this is the practice phase, and this is the production phase. In each part, in each phase, you have to tell me what are the material that you're going to use throughout. Are you going to use markers? Are you going to use visual aids? Are you going to use a personalized story, for example? Tell me about the interaction between you and the students. Is it teacher-centered, or it is teacher to students? Is there a part where you, or is there a time where you're going to put students into pairs, for instance, or groups to discuss something, or brainstorm ideas, or answer a few questions? So you have to make it as interactive as possible, and even if this is your part as a teacher to perform, but you have also to include your students in the middle. As for the timing, make sure that it doesn't exceed 10 minutes, as we said, and for the objectives, say where exactly or what exactly is the use of every single step that you are doing. The presentation phase is supposed to be so detailed. You say everything, starting from the lead-in to the warm-up, and then the personalized story. You just say it in brief, write it. You script everything, and then you say, for example, teacher greets students, teacher asks students, and then put the questions that you're gonna ask them. So make it as detailed as possible. In the practice phase, you're going to tell me exactly what you're going to do. Which exercise are you going to give to the students? Which page? What are the answers? You can also script the answers. And here, of course, you're going to put the material, like, for example, handouts. You're going to say the interaction is supposed to be from students to students, and while teacher is monitoring. And here, give it from 5 to 7 minutes, including giving feedback as well. And of course, here you can also give the objectives that you want to achieve by each stage that you're including. And as for the production phase, here you have 20 minutes. So I want it as detailed as possible. You tell me everything. How you're going to put students into groups. What is the activity? What are the instructions that you're going to give them? How you're going to check instructions? What are the framework that you're going to work on? Like, for example, I want you now to do 1, 2, 3. And in this part, I want you to list 1, 2, 3. So make sure that you put all the details, and at the end, don't forget to give feedback, and then wrap up the lesson at the end. So from what we have observed here, it seems that we have the top sheet, which includes the main aim, the secondary aim, the sources and materials used, and also personal action points that you want to work on, your board layout, your anticipated problems and solutions. And here, I want you to include both things that are related to language and things are related to technical problems that happens inside the classroom for the time being. And then later on, you will understand that you can manage technology, when you can manage the misbehavior, you can manage things that are physical. So let's concentrate on the language anticipated problems. For example, if your students are odd numbers, if your technology went out of order, if your students arrived late, if some students finish early. So you should know what to do exactly. And then comes the main lesson, or the body of the lesson. And here you have to make sure that you have what you're going to teach, why you're going to teach it, what are the procedures, what is the time given to each stage, and what is the interaction. Make it as varied as possible, like from students to teacher to students, to students, or sometimes you put student to student, which is like a pair work or group work. This is an example of the board layout. It's here now. Imagine that I'm starting my class is this way. I want to put Alan and Todd, and I drew their pictures on the board in the fixed area because I don't want to erase it, because I'm gonna use it later on the production phase. And then they ask the question, and this question is gonna be the key question that it will be used throughout the lesson and will be used in the production phase. So keep it in the fixed area and don't erase this. In the workplace or the workspace I have to write Melbourne, Dubai, Paris, and then give adjectives to describe each city. So I'll put it in the workspace because I will need it only for the listening activity, and then I'm gonna erase everything later. For the anticipated problems, I may write this. Students may not identify Melbourne or know much about the city. The solution is to guide the learners to the right country and elicit an example or adjectives from the class. Now, some students may arrive late. The solution is to ask them to join a stronger pair for the lead-in activity and encourage these learners to explain the task. I think that's enough for this video, but simple and brief recap. Don't forget that we have different lesson formats. However, the standard one is the PP approach, which is the presentation, practice, production. The production phase is quite important because it is considered the transition phase between the classroom and the real world outside. And also make sure that your word plan is quite crucial in order to attract the students' attention and help you start in a relaxed manner. And my advice to you when you start planning your lesson is to plan it bottom top, not from top bottom, in order to give more time for the production phase and less time for the practice and the presentation phase. Thank you for now, and see you in next videos.